Welcome to this deep dive. We've got a really fascinating set of audio and text sources you shared with us.
Yeah. What's the focus?
Well, our mission today is to really get to the heart of the Together We Move initiative. That's Chanel. We're going to explore what got it started, what keeps it going,
Okay.
and even touch on some related areas, stuff like making activities more inclusive and how universities look at admissions.
Ah, right. And what's immediately interesting is that part of what we're looking at comes from, well, a joint recording with the podcast Grandma Washes Screws, or Z.
Exactly.
It sounds like that conversation really delved into the personal side of this work.
Absolutely. And to give you a bit of a behind-the-scenes peek, one of the speakers in our sources talks about taking part in the Alavi Play Race Park event in Taitung.
Oh, yeah.
Apparently, that experience led directly to their recording with Grandma Washes Screws the very next morning. The slightly less glamorous detail, they were still dealing with a bit of lingering lake water in their nose from swimming in flowing lake. Oh, no.
Yeah, so it made their voice a tad nasal. Just a little reminder that even, insightful discussions can have their slightly soggy moments.
Huh. Well, it's those very human, slightly imperfect details that often make the bigger picture so much more relatable, right?
Deeply.
So, let's get right to the core of Together We Move. What can you tell us about how it started and, what its fundamental beliefs are?
Okay, let's unpack this. Together We Move. It beautifully translates to love sports without obstacles, which, perfectly captures their mission.
Yeah, that's clear.
It began with a seemingly simple aim, getting people with disabilities involved in sports, things like running, swimming, cycling. And there's this one story that really sticks with you. It's about an individual with pretty significant physical differences. Short arms, no palm, just a thumb and a pinky.
Okay.
Taking part in a running event in Kenting. The person recounting this was initially just amazed, not just that this individual was running, but that they were clearly enjoying it.
Wow. A big smile despite the heat and the effort,
That instantly makes you reconsider your assumptions, doesn't it?
Right.
We often instinctively focus on perceived limitations rather than seeing the potential for joy and achievement in unexpected forms.
Precisely. And it becomes even more powerful. This same person then wanted to try a 51.5-kilometer triathlon.
Whoa, okay. A triathlon.
Yeah. Now, that threw up some considerable practical challenges. Swimming was the first hurdle, initially solved with a rather whimsical unicorn float.
A unicorn float? Seriously? Yeah.
Then came cycling, which required some serious creative problem solving. A standard road bike with drop handlebars just didn't work.
Why not?
Reach, knee clearance, grip issues, all of it. They experimented with modifications, eventually finding a workable solution using a rest handlebar pad for elbow support and adjusting the handlebars forward.
What's fascinating here is the sheer ingenuity, the dedication required to overcome these very practical obstacles. It highlights how often solutions need to be custom built because, universal designs don't truly cater to everyone.
And here's where it gets really interesting. During all this, the founder of Together We Move had this surprising realization.
Yeah.
This individual had never actually ridden a bicycle in their entire 27 years.
What? Never?
Never. The speaker describes their own disbelief, like going from, no way, that can't be right, to the slow dawning that, given this person's physical makeup, suitable equipment had simply never been available.
Oh, wow. That really brings home a crucial point, doesn't it?
It really does.
It underscores how societal infrastructure, even everyday equipment, is often designed with very specific, often unspoken standard user in mind. And that unintentionally excludes a significant portion of the population.
Exactly. But the story has this incredible payoff. They got the modified bike working, and the experience of this person riding along the Taitung coast, feeling the wind, seeing the scenery for the first time on a bicycle. The speaker says the joy was just beyond words. That silence, it often speaks volumes about truly transformative moments.
It really does. It suggests a profound sense of liberation and inclusion, something that had been missing for so long.
It makes you stop and think. The speaker then poses this really important question. How many other adults in Taiwan face these kinds of unseen barriers? And what responsibility does the nation have to address them?
This raises a critical point about societal responsibility, doesn't it? It's not just about individual challenges. It's about the limitations that a society inadvertently creates when it doesn't fully account for the diverse needs of its people.
Totally. And on a related note, there's a more recent, sort of smaller scale example about the availability of U-Bike in Taitung.
Oh yeah, the shared bikes.
Right. For someone who's left-handed, the gear shifter being on the right side presented a surprisingly significant challenge on an uphill ride.
Really? How so?
It essentially limited them to just the first gear. It's a seemingly minor detail, right? But it really illustrates how even designs intended for everyone can still create unexpected hurdles for some.
Yeah, that's a good reminder that accessibility isn't a one-size-fits-all solution. Often the needs of smaller groups can be unintentionally overlooked in mainstream design.
Now let's shift gears a bit and focus on the person who actually started Together We Move.
Okay, the founder.
Right. Our sources give us some interesting insights into their personal journey and, what sparked this whole initiative. Interestingly, their academic background is in veterinary medicine from National Taiwan University, NTU.
Veterinary medicine, that's unexpected.
Yeah, apparently it was their first choice. They even pursued studies abroad in that field.
That's quite a deviation, then, from leading an initiative focused on inclusive sports. What prompted that change in direction?
Well, during their time at NTU, they were heavily involved in the Taekwondo club and experienced a lot of frustration with consistently losing competitions despite putting in the training hours.
I can imagine that's tough.
Yeah. So this led them to start questioning the training methods, comparing them to what they were finding in research papers. It sounds like a curiosity about effective methods and a desire to understand the why behind things kind of took root early on.
It sounds like that initial frustration became a catalyst, maybe, for a deeper exploration of how to achieve goals and the role of, well, effective strategies.
Exactly. Ultimately, frustrated with not achieving the athletic success they hoped for, they made a transition. They went to study sports coaching at Chinese Culture University.
Right.
Now, this wasn't necessarily met with immediate enthusiasm from their family.
Understandable, given the vet background.
Right. Especially after investing in a prestigious degree like veterinary medicine, which is, traditionally highly regarded. It highlights those societal and familial expectations around career paths.
Yeah, definitely. Our sources make it clear that the typical path for veterinary medicine graduates is, well, to become a veterinarian. So this was definitely a less conventional choice.
For sure. Then there was a really significant experience while they were working with a child with cerebral palsy who was learning to walk.
Okay.
The sheer emotional impact of the child simply asking, "Is walking very difficult?" That really resonated with them.
Wow. That simple question. It really encapsulates the immense effort and challenges faced by individuals with disabilities doing everyday activities that many of us just take completely for granted.
Exactly.
It's a poignant reminder to consider perspectives beyond our own lived experience.
It really is. This experience seems to have prompted a deeper look at their own background. They came from a working-class family and initially aspired to be a construction foreman like their father.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah, viewing it as a profession that represented strength and capability. However, they later shifted towards pursuing education as a way to avoid the physical demands of manual labor. It's a common story, isn't it? Seeking opportunities for upward mobility through education.
That's a familiar narrative for many, yeah. The pursuit of education as a pathway to different kinds of opportunities.
After getting into NTU, a strong belief developed in the idea that hard work inevitably leads to success. Just work hard, you'll get there.
A meritocracy idea.
Exactly. However, this viewpoint evolved over time into a deeper understanding of inherent advantages and, systemic inequalities.
Wow.
The founder acknowledges the privilege of having a supportive family and not having the responsibility of caring for ill or elderly parents, factors that significantly influence many people's lives and the opportunities available to them.
That's a crucial step in developing a broader understanding of social justice, isn't it? Recognizing the unearned advantages one might possess and how those can shape life trajectories.
Yeah. This growing awareness then fueled the desire to lend a hand, as they put it, to those in society who need extra support. And that ultimately led to their dedication to promoting sports for people with disabilities. They also had prior experience working at a labor education center, which likely further broadened their understanding of societal challenges and support systems.
So it's a journey, really. Personal growth, from initial personal ambitions to a much wider understanding of societal barriers, and then a commitment to creating more inclusive opportunities.
Exactly.
Okay, moving on to how Together We Move actively tackles these systemic barriers and fosters inclusivity.
Right.
Our sources share a particularly striking story about a student with a hearing impairment completing a 21-kilometer run with guidance.
Right.
The surprise and admiration this generated really highlights how often the capabilities of individuals with disabilities are underestimated.
Yeah.
It speaks to the maybe unconscious biases we hold about what people can achieve.
Absolutely. And organizing inclusive sporting events, as you can imagine, brings its own set of worries and responsibilities.
I bet.
Especially when it comes to safety and potential negative perceptions towards participants with disabilities. There's a story about the only bike accident during one event.
Right.
It actually involved the founder's spouse.
Oh, wow. That adds a very personal layer of concern, doesn't it, to the already present pressures of managing the event.
Definitely. It really underscores the deep personal commitment and the potential for significant personal stress that often comes with advocating for and creating these inclusive spaces.
Yeah.
Over time, though, the sources indicate that these events have become more streamlined, thanks to growing experience and the support of dedicated organizers. The pandemic, of course, did necessitate a shift towards at-home training for a while.
Right, that affected everything.
Interestingly, one of the Grandma Washes Screws podcast hosts admits that they initially viewed Together We Move with a degree of skepticism.
Oh, really?
Yeah, even jokingly calling it a cult at one point.
Huh. Well, it's not unusual for initiatives that challenge established norms or that one doesn't fully understand to be initially met with some level of doubt or even mild suspicion.
True. This same host then shares their past experiences interacting with individuals with Asperger's and other less visible disabilities during their time at NTU. They volunteered at the resource classroom.
Okay.
This firsthand experience led to a significant realization about the sheer diversity of disabilities, many of which aren't immediately obvious, and the critical importance of seeing individuals beyond just their limitations.
That shift in perspective from focusing on limitations to recognizing individual potential, that's often the crucial first step towards genuine inclusivity, isn't it?
Yeah, I think so. And a really key insight emerges here. Individuals with disabilities primarily want to be seen as human, first and foremost.
Right.
Not defined or treated as fundamentally different. This understanding underpins the philosophy of promoting sports equity rather than simply welfare.
That distinction between equity and welfare is so important.
Why do you say that?
Well, welfare often addresses basic needs, right?
Yeah.
While equity aims to level the playing field and ensure equal opportunities for participation and, importantly, autonomy in making choices.
Got it. The focus shifts to addressing the lack of genuine choice that individuals with disabilities often face in everyday situations.
Exactly.
And the sources provide a really powerful example of these logistical challenges. When a government inspector who uses a wheelchair needed to travel to Green Island,
Oh, Green Island. Okay.
it exposed the significant lack of accessible transportation infrastructure. They had to go to extraordinary lengths, including shipping a specialized bus to the island just to make it possible.
Tipping a whole bus.
Yeah.
Wow. That starkly illustrates the profound and often costly adaptations required when accessibility isn't built into standard infrastructure and services from the outset.
Yeah. This then links directly to the broader implications for Taiwan's aging society, where increasing mobility limitations can lead to significant social isolation, even in urban areas, if buildings and public spaces aren't truly accessible. The lack of widespread accessibility infrastructure outside of the major metropolitan areas like Taipei and New Taipei City is a real concern. It's likened to trying to navigate with a large, unwieldy suitcase in the rain, often simply impossible.
And as the population ages, issues of accessibility cease to be concerns for just a minority, right? They increasingly become necessities for a much larger segment of society. Failing to address this now has significant future consequences.
Definitely. Common issues are highlighted, like covered walkways, those hay being enclosed or used for storage.
Yeah, you see that a lot.
And parking spaces that block pedestrian pathways, forcing people into potentially dangerous traffic lanes.
Right, pushing people out into the road.
There's even a really sobering anecdote shared about an elderly person in a wheelchair being tragically hit by a vehicle.
Oh, that's awful. These are stark and heartbreaking reminders of the very real dangers created by inaccessible environments and the profound human cost of overlooking these fundamental design considerations.
The discussion brings up a somewhat counterintuitive idea, though, that sometimes a small amount of individual inconvenience, like, say, choosing to park a little further away, can actually lead to a significant collective benefit.
How so?
By creating safer and more accessible pedestrian spaces for everyone.
Okay. It's a matter of shifting our mindset, maybe, from prioritizing individual convenience above all else to recognizing the interconnectedness of our shared spaces and the collective benefits of accessibility.
Yeah, exactly. So, in part 4, we delve into the specific challenges encountered while promoting adaptive sports and really consider what true support looks like.
Okay. Setbacks and support.
Right. When asked about major setbacks, the response isn't about one big event, but rather the ongoing nature of encountering obstacles, a constant negotiation with systemic barriers that often leads to disappointments. This speaks to the persistent nature of advocacy work, you know? Progress isn't always a straight line, and it often requires continuous effort and resilience when facing resistance.
Right. An early experience is recounted where a race organizer outright refused entry to wheelchair users for a running race, just offered a refund.
Seriously, just no, yeah.
It really underscored the often uninformed and, frankly, discriminatory attitudes that can be encountered.
It's disheartening to hear about such blatant exclusion, and it really highlights why proactive advocacy is so necessary to challenge these kinds of practices.
Yeah. The sources describe a proactive approach to challenging these discriminatory practices, including directly engaging with businesses that obstruct public walkways.
Like actually confronting them.
Apparently so. This emphasizes the importance of actively advocating for accessibility rights, even when it might lead to uncomfortable conversations or, negative perceptions.
Right.
The legal context of these covered walkways and their intended purpose for public passage is briefly explained, highlighting that obstruction isn't just inconvenient but often legally problematic.
It's about asserting the right of individuals with disabilities to access public spaces and holding those who impede that access accountable.
Exactly. There's a contrast drawn between the initial perception of the Together We Move founder as perhaps being a bit difficult or having some issues, and the current understanding of their deep dedication and tireless work.
Right, the perception changed.
There's also an interesting anecdote about a supervising teacher's anxieties about taking students off campus for research, contrasting it with the founder's much more proactive approach to hands-on experiential learning.
So, a clash of philosophies there. It reflects different approaches regarding risk assessment, maybe, and the perceived value of real-world experiences versus a more cautious, controlled approach to learning.
Yeah, seems like it.
The conversation really emphasizes the importance of striving for more than just getting by. Instead, pursuing meaningful activities that align with one's personal values, those that don't cause harm, and ideally contribute to a more just society.
Right. Living with purpose.
This leads to a discussion about the complexities of situations where actions intended to be helpful or corrective might actually be perceived as harmful. They use the analogy of correctional schools.
That's a really nuanced point about the potential unintended consequences of even well-intentioned interventions and the critical importance of considering diverse perspectives and potential impacts.
Yeah. And a surprising and concerning finding is shared. The majority of students in Taiwanese correctional schools are classified only with intellectual disabilities.
Only intellectual disabilities.
Yeah, despite international data suggesting significantly higher rates of learning disabilities and ADHD in similar populations.
Wow.
This raises serious questions about proper identification and the availability of appropriate support systems within the education system.
That significant discrepancy is indeed concerning. It really warrants further investigation. Accurate identification of learning disabilities and ADHD is absolutely crucial for providing the right kinds of educational and rehabilitative support to these vulnerable individuals.
Definitely. The importance of positive educational experiences within correctional facilities to foster successful social reintegration is really highlighted.
Yeah, that makes sense.
There's a poignant story about students in these schools expressing genuine surprise when teachers showed them real care and invested time.
Surprise. That's sad.
Yeah, contrasting it with what they often perceive as a more detached clocking in, clocking out mentality. And the really troubling issue of schools and teachers actively trying to transfer out students with greater needs is also brought up.
It really underscores the vital role that educators play in providing consistent support and fostering positive relationships, particularly for students facing significant challenges. That tendency to push out students with greater needs can unfortunately just exacerbate existing inequalities and hinder their long-term prospects.
Exactly. Okay, finally we move into part 5. This offers some really fascinating insights into the university admissions process for special education programs.
Admissions. Always interesting.
And how they look beyond just academic performance. The discussion highlights the effectiveness of the interview process in really gauging a candidate's genuine passion and suitability for the field,
Okay.
suggesting that even well-crafted applications can always mask a lack of true interest.
It really underscores the limitations of relying solely on quantitative metrics like test scores, right? And the significant value of qualitative assessments like interviews in evaluating a candidate's true disposition and genuine commitment to a particular field.
Yeah. Examples of interview questions designed to assess genuine interest are shared, like asking about having siblings with disabilities or their awareness of current issues within special education.
Right. Testing their knowledge and connection.
It seems that superficial preparation or coaching can be quickly revealed through more in-depth questioning.
You can often tell, yeah.
The sources share an interesting contrast between two female applicants. One came from a family deeply involved in special education, but wasn't admitted to the special education program at National Taipei University of Education, NTUE. And another, with no prior direct exposure, who was admitted. It sparks curiosity about NTUE's specific admissions criteria.
It challenges the perhaps natural assumption that lived experience alone guarantees admission, doesn't it?
Totally.
It suggests that admissions committees are likely looking for a broader range of qualities, motivations, and perspectives.
Yeah, it's clarified that having a sibling with a disability, a ekcho, while maybe providing valuable personal experience, isn't an automatic ticket in.
Right.
The admissions committee is looking for well-rounded individuals with their own aspirations and critical thinking skills, not solely those whose lives have been primarily focused on caregiving responsibilities.
That makes sense. They need to be their own person, too.
Exactly. The importance of observing a candidate's overall skills, their ability to think critically, and their resilience during the interview process is really emphasized. They even use situational questions and unexpected challenges like a brief test in an unfamiliar language to see how candidates react under pressure and approach problem solving.
Wow, throwing curveballs.
Yeah. And group discussions during interviews also provide valuable insights into their interpersonal skills and how well they work in a team.
These diverse assessment methods aim to identify future professionals who not only possess the necessary knowledge base, but also have the crucial interpersonal skills, adaptability, and genuine empathy needed to thrive in the field of special education.
Right, you need the whole package. The personal application process is defended against criticisms.
Okay, how so?
With the argument that relying heavily on standardized tests can disproportionately disadvantage students from less privileged socioeconomic backgrounds.
That's a common argument, yeah.
An inspiring anecdote is shared about a student with severe physical limitations being admitted, really highlighting the potential for diverse candidates to gain access through this more holistic process.
That's great to hear.
The preferential treatment and admissions for students from disadvantaged rural areas or low-income families is also mentioned.
So, trying to level the playing field somewhat.
Yeah. The overall conclusion is that personal applications act as a kind of revealing mirror, effectively exposing insincere applicants.
Interesting phrase.
Though it's acknowledged that occasional errors in judgment might occur during short interviews. But the observation is that unmotivated students tend to drop out later anyway.
Yeah, that often happens. It presents a really compelling argument for a more comprehensive admissions approach. One that takes into account a wider range of factors beyond just academic scores. It could potentially lead to greater equity and identify individuals with a deeper, more intrinsic passion for the field.
Right, and parents are advised to really let their children pursue their genuine interests.
Good advice.
Because forcing them down a particular path can often lead to unhappiness and lack of fulfillment. Stories are shared about students who demonstrate real enthusiasm for working with individuals with disabilities.
You'd love to see that passion.
And teachers are encouraged to actively listen to and support their students' aspirations. The founder's own somewhat unconventional university choice vet med over human med based on personal interests and wanting to stay in Taipei is shared again.
Right, come in full circle.
Along with a note that the traditional perception of veterinarians just treating pets is quite outdated. The field is much broader now.
It really reinforces the importance of intrinsic motivation and personal alignment when making significant career choices, rather than just chasing perceived prestige or external expectations.
Yeah. The modern trend of interdisciplinary learning and the increasing flexibility of university programs are discussed. Students are encouraged to consider factors like location and personal interests when choosing a university, and to embrace the value of experiencing different environments.
Good points. University isn't just about the major.
The distinct student culture at NTU is contrasted with the more teacher training-focused and structured environment of National Taiwan Normal University, NTNU's Special Education Department.
Ah, NTNU, Shita. Different vibe.
Yeah, including the early emphasis on punctuality and professional conduct. Positive feedback is shared about NTNU's positive impact on students' personal and professional development.
It highlights the diverse cultures and primary missions of different universities and specific programs, doesn't it? Encouraging prospective students to think carefully about what kind of learning environment would best support their individual growth and long-term aspirations.
Exactly. Concerns about potential unfairness in student counseling and admissions are addressed, with a reiteration of the importance of recognizing each student's unique qualities and guiding them towards paths where they are most likely to thrive.
Seeing the individual.
The core message is that genuine fit and passion are far more important indicators of future success and satisfaction than simply chasing high scores or a perceived top-tier institution. The final thought is that a well-thought-out and comprehensive application process ultimately leads to the best possible outcomes, regardless of the specific university or program chosen. It reassures the listener that even seemingly less conventional choices can indeed be the right path, and that admissions committees bring a wealth of experience to evaluating candidates' potential.
Ultimately, it's about recognizing the multifaceted nature of human potential, isn't it? And creating pathways that allow individuals to discover their strengths and contribute meaningfully to society in ways that resonate with their true selves.
Well said. Well, that brings us to the end of this deep dive. Expert speaker, thank you so much for lending your expertise and helping us navigate through all this insightful material.
My pleasure. It was a truly enriching discussion.
And we want to give another shout out to the wonderful team at Grandma Washes Screws for being part of this conversation. For those of you who prefer to listen in English, we'll be using AI to create an English version of this discussion. And to you, our listener, Figuga, thank you for diving deep with us today. Until our next exploration.